All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're going to treat your brain not just as some mysterious, squishy biological blob, but as a highly advanced piece of hardware that desperately needs a software patch to survive the modern world. Think about it. It is absolutely wild that we are walking around with a supercomputer inside our skulls, yet most of us never even got the instruction manual. Well, today, we are writing that manual together.
So here's our roadmap. We're looking at inside your brain's hardware, the mechanics of memory, brains of high achievers, the neuroscience of addiction, understanding modern anxiety, and building willpower and balance. Let's hit it.
First up, I want you to ask yourself this. Why on earth does a slightly passive-aggressive email from your boss trigger the exact same physical reaction in your body as a wild tiger leaping out of the bushes? It's crazy, right? To answer that provocative question, we first need to understand the basic evolutionary machinery living right inside our skulls.
Section 1. Inside your brain's hardware.
It's actually kind of surprising how much of our physical brain hardware shares a baseline circuitry with a rat, or say a goat. The anatomy essentially breaks down into two main parts. You got your gray matter, which is where the cells actually live and act as the signal producers, and then you have your white matter. You can think of white matter as the physical cables carrying those signals across your brain and straight down your spine to the rest of your body.
Now, here's a bit of a relief. Mindlessly scrolling through your phone isn't literally rotting your gray matter. Instead, it causes this weird sort of flicker. Because you aren't really giving your brain focused attention, it struggles to produce clear categorical thought. It is exactly like an old tube TV, flickering, struggling to fully turn on. That is literally what is happening when you get that dreaded brain fog.
Section 2. The mechanics of memory.
Moving from hardware to software, our life experiences act kind of like an interior decorator for the brain. Let's say you form a new explicit memory, like what you had for dinner yesterday. That gets encoded first in a structure called the hippocampus. But, and this is absolutely key, as that memory is assigned meaning during the consolidation phase, it doesn't just stay put. It eventually gets distributed across the wider cortex. It's exactly like placing familiar, comfortable furniture around a room. It settles in and becomes a deeply rooted part of your mind.
And as these memories distribute, they create physical maps called engrams. Now, our brains absolutely love shortcuts. So sometimes a partial activation of an engram, like just stepping into a room that kind of matches the vibe of an old memory, is enough to bring back the whole distributed network. It blew my mind to realize this is the exact mechanism behind that eerie, bizarre feeling of déjà vu.
Section 3. Brains of High Achievers. Let's look at 3 absolute titans and see how they uniquely program their brains to win. Take Michael Jordan. He constantly visualized the procedural steps of his game, deeply grooving his striatum, which is the brain's motor center. Then you have Michael Phelps, who used his prefrontal cortex, the logical shield, to override panic when imagining negative outcomes, like his goggles breaking. And Napoleon? Well, he operated almost purely from the amygdala. He used fear-based survival instincts, basically imagining all the ways he could die in battle.
But here is the massive catch with that last strategy. Operating out of amygdala-driven fear might win you some battles in the short term, but man, it will absolutely fry your brain with stress hormones over the long haul. The science is incredibly clear here. The most sustainable success comes from falling in love with the process. That is the ultimate superpower for a healthy, high-achieving brain.
Section 4. The neuroscience of addiction.
Unfortunately, that exact same motivation circuitry that keeps high achievers going is incredibly vulnerable to modern system glitches. When we look at dopamine levels, natural rewards, like good food or social interaction, give us a normal, healthy baseline. But our hijacked rewards, we're talking alcohol, sugar, endless doom scrolling, the dopamine hits from these are astronomical. They completely dwarf our natural biological rewards and totally destroy our brain's baseline gain, making normal, healthy activities just feel boring.
And the physical consequences are intense. When these modern vices hijack your primary reward center, the nucleus accumbens, they literally change the shape of your brain. Your hippocampus shrinks, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for saying no to bad decisions, also shrinks. Meanwhile, your reward center becomes overgrown and hypersensitive. Your tolerance shoots up, and your brain basically loses its willpower override.
Section 5. Understanding modern anxiety. Which brings us to a massive glitch in our operating system. Our brain honestly cannot tell the difference between a lethal predator and a modern inconvenience.
When your hypothalamus detects a threat, it tells your pituitary gland to signal the adrenal glands. Suddenly, cortisol and adrenaline just flood your body. Your heart rate skyrockets and your body actually shuts down non-essential systems like digestion and immunity because it thinks you need to run for your life. That is exactly why a panic attack physically feels like a heart attack.
Listen to this quote because it's vital. Anxiety is when there is no obvious threat, but your body is responding like there is an immediate threat. So, if you're dealing with a toxic boss continuously sending you awful emails, or you're facing relentless social media bullying, your body thinks you are literally trapped in a room with an invisible tiger. You can't fight, you can't run, so you just sit there, continuously dumping cortisol and prematurely aging your brain.
Section 6. Building willpower and balance.
Okay, so how do we actually fix our hardware to handle the stress of all this modern software? It's all about the scales of your nervous system. We spend way too much time in our sympathetic nervous system. That's our high adrenaline fight-or-flight mode. To stop your brain from aging faster due to chronic cortisol exposure, you have got to intentionally dedicate hours every week to activating your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your rest, digest, and recovery system.
Now, I want you to focus on this number for a second, 25. It turns out peak neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to easily rewire its physical structure, happens in your first 25 years. But do not panic if you're older than that. The incredible news is you can absolutely still force your brain to adapt later on. You just have to intentionally do hard things.
We actually call these hard things neurobics. Think of it like aerobics, but for your neurons. By purposefully undertaking difficult tasks, you strengthen your prefrontal cortex. Whether you're practicing fasting to delay gratification, forcing yourself to learn a completely new language or an instrument, or even something as simple as brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand to break procedural memory, you are effectively building that willpower muscle. You are physically training your brain to override bad habits.
As we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this deeply empowering truth. Your brain is a machine that literally becomes what you feed it. So look at your daily habits and your routines. What hard, uncomfortable, but ultimately rewarding thing will you teach your brain today to trigger your ultimate OS upgrade?